Think somewhere in Scotland, there is a skeleton that should not exist. It has the hips of a woman, the skull of a man, and the bones of 3 different people all stitched together and soaked in battery-level acid. This is not a mistake. This is not contamination. This is deliberate. 3,000 years ago, on the island of South Uist, someone collected human remains from a peat bog so acidic it rivals the electrolyte inside a car battery. The acid leached calcium from bone demineralization, turning solid human architecture into something soft, pliable, cuttable. And then they assembled it. A chimera. A jigsaw human built from the pieces of the dead. DNA analysis confirmed what the eye could not accept: 3 separate genetic signatures, 3 separate individuals, forced into the shape of one. We imagine our ancestors as simple, living close to the land, respecting death, burying their own. But this skeleton speaks a different language. It speaks of deliberate disassembly, of bodies stored in acid pits like spare parts in a macabre warehouse, of a culture that did not see the corpse as sacred but as raw material. In one massacred Pueblo home, researchers found something else in the cold cooking hearth: fossilized human feces, left where a family once shared meals. A detail so grotesque it seems random. It is not random. But the Scottish chimeras were not the strangest bodies we have found. Deep in South Africa, there is a chamber so difficult to reach that modern cavers with headlamps and ropes can barely survive the descent. The Dinaledi Chamber. A geological lock buried beneath 12 meters of vertical, pitch-black rock. Yet somehow, a species of human with a brain 1/3 our size managed to carry their dead down that shaft in absolute darkness. We still do not know how. To understand why ancient humans would mutilate their own bodies to survive, we need to examine the one who went furthest. Somewhere around 600 AD, a man in Lombardy, Italy, survived something almost no one survives: a complete forearm amputation, performed with a bone saw. 0 anesthesia. He did not simply survive. He adapted. He replaced his missing arm with a forged iron blade, fused to the stump. The weapon attached by leather straps wound tight around the raw, healed tissue, a crude flesh and iron piston driven by nothing but agony and the refusal to die. But keeping it attached required constant maintenance. Archaeologists found his teeth, ground down to the pulp cavities, the raw biological wiring that should be protected by enamel. Exposed. Destroyed. He used his own jaw as a clamp. He bit down on the leather straps to tighten them. Over and over. Year after year. Until the enamel fractured. Until the dentin eroded. Until the nerve itself touched air. Every single day of his remaining life was pain. And every single day, he chose to keep the blade attached. The stump and iron fused into a mechanism that should not function. Yet it did. Not because it was elegant, but because the alternative was death. The Lombard warrior's knife arm is almost modern compared to what came before. Some of our ancestors did not just modify their bodies. They abandoned the very concept of having just one. The Dinaledi Chamber in South Africa's Rising Star Cave contains the remains of at least 15 Homo naledi individuals. But reaching the chamber requires passing through a gap so narrow that only the smallest modern researchers can fit, while dropping 12 meters straight down in total darkness. 12 meters. The equivalent of free climbing down a 4-story chimney with your eyes sewn shut. Homo naledi had a brain roughly 500 cubic centimeters. About the size of an orange. Modern humans average 1,400. Yet these small-brained hominins repeatedly navigated this labyrinth while carrying corpses. In that chamber, there are no photons. Not dim light, zero light. Your eyes become useless masses of jelly. You navigate by feeling limestone scrape against your skull. By sensing the pressure of rock walls millimeters from your face. This happened 250,000 years ago. These beings were burying their dead in ritual chambers while our direct ancestors were still struggling to control fire. The answer is not that Homo naledi was secretly intelligent. The answer is that we have fundamentally misunderstood what intelligence means. Navigation does not require calculation. It requires sensation. And in absolute darkness, with a body small enough to fit, with proprioception, the internal map your body builds of itself in space, refined over millions of years, the cave becomes readable. The skull scraping rock is not failure. It is data. Remember the fossilized feces in the Pueblo hearth. Researchers were not looking for shock value. They were searching for a molecule. Myoglobin. An oxygen-binding protein found only in muscle tissue, the biological black box recorder of what a body has consumed. It is different from hemoglobin, which circulates in blood. Myoglobin exists only in meat. In muscle fiber. If you find pure myoglobin in someone's digestive system, there is only one explanation. They ate flesh. The coprolite contained 100% human myoglobin. No plant matter. No animal protein. For at least 12 straight hours, the individual who left this ate nothing but human muscle. The Pueblo people did not become monsters for entertainment. Around 1150 AD, the climate collapsed. A megadrought lasting nearly 50 years shattered the Chaco system, the complex society that had sustained these communities for centuries. When the rain stopped, so did everything else. But the Pueblo massacre was only 850 years ago. The oldest evidence of hominin cannibalism takes us somewhere far darker. 1.45 million years into the past. A butchered shinbone from Turkana, Kenya. 9 precise stone tool cut marks. Evidence that one of our earliest relatives was systematically processed. Harvested. You cannot understand these bodies without understanding what made them. The Dinalidi chamber is not merely difficult to reach. It is actively hostile. The 12-meter vertical shaft exists in absolute darkness, a crushing, geological filtration system that squeezes biological matter through rock capillaries like an Earth-sized vice. In that space, your retinas have nothing to capture. You do not adjust to the dark. There is no dark to adjust to. Only the absence of photons. Your hands become your primary sensory organs, feeling jagged limestone press against bone. The Scottish peat bog was no gentler. The acidity stripped calcium from skeleton. The structural integrity dissolved. What was once rigid architecture became soft tissue, cuttable, stackable, ready for reassembly. The sound of survival was not heroic. It was the metallic scrape of an iron blade grinding against a splintered, unhealed radius bone. The wet crunch of human teeth fracturing under pressure. The biological machinery of desperation running at full capacity. The Turkana cannibalism happened 1.45 million years ago. Over 5,000 times older than the United States. The Homo naledi burials occurred 250,000 years ago. The Scottish chimeras were assembled 3,000 years ago. The Lombard warrior ground his teeth to exposed nerve 1,500 years ago. The Pueblo massacre happened 850 years ago. These are not isolated incidents scattered across time. They span 1.45 million years, multiple continents, and at least 3 different species of human. This is not aberration. This is baseline. The beings who did this did not simply survive. They persisted through apocalyptic megadroughts that shattered established civilizations. The ones who refused to adapt? They are the victims. They are the bones with the cut marks. We look at these bones and see monsters. We see primitive violence. We see everything we have evolved beyond. But that is the comfortable interpretation. These ancestors were not broken humans. They were humans operating at full capacity. The knife arm. The chimera stitching. The impossible cave navigation. The systematic consumption of neighbors. That is not malfunction. That is the survival machinery running exactly as designed. We assume extreme body modification, complex navigation, and calculated resource extraction are modern concepts. But these beings were biohacking their bodies millennia before modern science. They were orchestrating systematic cannibalism with clinical precision. They were navigating subterranean labyrinths that would defeat modern technology. Every mechanism that allowed the Lombard warrior to grind his teeth down to exposed nerve, every instinct that drove homonality into that abyss, every chemical pathway that let a starving human digest their neighbor's flesh, we carry all of it. Right now. Dormant. That fossilized feces in the Pueblo hearth. At the start, it was just a disgusting detail of an ancient crime scene. But under the lens of survival, it becomes something else. The hearth was where families gathered. Where children were fed. Where culture was transmitted across generations. The hearth was the center of civilization itself. And when the drought came, when the rain stopped for years, when the crops failed, when the system collapsed, that same hearth became the place where one human being digested another. Everything we call morality is just a thin layer of behavior maintained by regular rainfall. The coprolite is not evidence of madness. It is evidence of what happens when the thin membrane of civilization ruptures. When the logistics of survival override the architecture of ethics. When the body remembers what the mind has chosen to forget. We are not evolved beyond anything. We are simply well-fed. The Scottish chimera, the Lombard warrior, the homonality navigators, the Pueblo survivors, they did not access some dark, primitive version of humanity. They accessed the original version. The one that still runs beneath our skin. The one that waits. If a collapsing climate was enough to drive our ancestors to feast on their own families and defile their homes, what exactly will it take for us to do the exact same thing?